there, welcome to Lessons with Lindsay. My name is Lindsay Wilkes and I'm the owner of the Cottage Mama and author of the book, So Classic, Clothes for Girls. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today I've got a great informational tutorial for you. I'm going to be talking to you about how to use a PDF pattern. I'm not sure if you're familiar with PDF patterns, but a lot of pattern designers are moving in that direction, offering their patterns online. The wonderful thing about this is when you purchase a PDF pattern, you don't have to wait to get it in the mail. You can download it instantly, print it, and start sewing. They're so wonderful, and it's an easy way for lots of designers to get their patterns out to you. So what do you need when using a PDF pattern? So you're obviously going to need your computer, and you're going to need your printer. But you also need to make sure that you have downloaded the most recent version of Adobe Reader. And Adobe is a completely free program to download. A lot of times I hear from ladies that are trying to print their patterns from mobile devices such as an iPad, or they're trying to open it directly from the website and they just can't get things to print right. And I find once they've opened it in Adobe Reader, we have a lot more success. Okay, so here I've downloaded my Georgia vintage dress pattern. This is one of the patterns that I sell on my website. So I've opened the pattern now in Adobe. When you go to Adobe Reader and you go to File, Print, you need to make sure that your printer is set to no scaling and you do not want the pattern to fit to page. That should also not be checked. Basically, you don't want to alter this pattern in any way. You don't want your printer trying to fit it on a page or trying to alter it in any way. You want to print the pattern exactly as the designer intended you to print it. So once we've got our settings all correct, we can come over here and click OK to go print. Now, if you would prefer to read the instructions on your computer or your tablet, that is fine. You can figure out which pages in this pattern are the actual pattern pieces, and you can save some paper by printing those pages. Also, if you don't have a home printer, you could also consider taking this to a copy shop, and some of them will print these patterns for you at a copy shop if you show them that you've purchased the pattern. So hopefully this has given you a little bit better visual on what you're going to need to do when you go to print your PDF pattern. Now you might be thinking, I have never thought that my pattern would come out on 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. How in the world is that supposed to form a full-size pattern sheet? Well, the pattern is going to print out on different pieces of paper, and there are going to be markers on these papers that I'm going to show you in a minute, and you will just piece these together to create your full-size pattern sheets. But before you even start any of that, you are going to want to make sure that your pattern printed correctly. And how are you going to do that? Well, I have brought two of my patterns here. I have brought one of my independent pattern collection and one from my book, So Classic, Clothes for Girls. And I just wanted to show you how you're going to make sure that your patterns are printed just so. So on both of my patterns, I have a test square. And this square is set to be a certain size. On my patterns, it's set to be 2 inches. So you are going to take your ruler, or I'm going to imagine most of you have a hem gauge in your sewing studio. So you're going to take this tool and measure your square. So here I have 2 patterns, and I am going to measure my 2-inch square. I'm going to measure this one, and I'm going to say, okay, yes, we're at 2 inches. And I'm going to come over here to my other one, and the same thing. It's measuring 2 inches. That means that my pattern printed out correctly. If these squares do not measure 2 inches, something is off on your pattern, and you do not want to begin sewing unless your test square is perfect. If you do, it's going to mess up the entire pattern. Even being off by 1/4 of an inch can really impact your garment. So try to go back, troubleshoot what's going on. Think again, did I open my pattern in Adobe Reader? Did I make sure all my printer settings were correct? Do I have the most updated version of Adobe Reader? Try to troubleshoot and figure out what could it be that is causing your test square to be off. because I guarantee you designers make sure that these test squares are perfect, and they're perfect so that you can get a perfect fitting garment. Okay, so what else are we going to need? We've got all our sheets printed out on our printer, and now we need to put them together. So we're going to need some trusty tape here and some scissors, or even better yet, a paper cutter. A paper cutter would come really handy for using PDF patterns, but most of us just have scissors at home, so these are going to work just fine as well. Okay, so I'm going to start with this PDF pattern I have here. Now, I didn't print out all the pieces because I just want to show you how to get started here, but I am going to take apart these pieces of paper, and as you'll notice with my patterns, they do print out in order, which makes it pretty easy to put them together. So we've got our test square piece, which is generally the first piece. So I'm going to place this one here. And I like to kind of lay them out before I cut them and put them together. And so I've got this one here. And this is my Georgia vintage dress pattern here. So it does have quite a few pieces. Okay, so I've got these pieces here. Now, on my independent patterns, you'll notice a lot of them have these circles. So we have a half circle here with the 1, and we have a half circle here with the 1. That means that those are going to go together. So I'm going to just lay these here like this. Again, those are not placed together yet. I'm just laying this out. And then this is a separate collar piece, so we can set that to the side. Then we've got here, we've got a 2. So our 2 is going to go together with our 2. So I want to show you just how to put these together. You just continue on doing this until you form a large pattern sheet to cut out your pattern pieces. So we have our circles here. We need to overlap these two pieces so that our circle will join. So generally, I just cut off one of these pieces. It really doesn't matter if you cut this one or this one, but when you're putting together a big PDF pattern, just decide on one way or another that you're going to do it all the way through and be consistent, because that's going to make this process go a lot faster. And when I mentioned at the beginning that you could use a paper cutter, that's going to make a lot of fast work. Once you have everything laid out, you can put these pieces of paper, if you've decided this is the one you're going to cut, and you could just put several of these all together and take this part of your paper off with one nice cut. But scissors are going to work just fine too. So we are going to cut off this top part here, right along the gray line, and we'll do the same thing over here. So then we're going to take this piece and this piece, lay them on top of one another, and try to line up the circle and our pattern piece as best we can here. And it takes a little adjusting to get it where we want it to go, and then just take some tape, try to hold it in place, tape it together. Now you don't have to tape all the way across the paper here, because that's not part of the pattern piece, so it doesn't really matter if that is actually taped, if you want to save on some tape. So then we're going to come over here and do the same thing. So if you'll notice, I left the bottom part on this one because we want something to set this pattern piece on top of. It's pretty hard when you cut off both areas and you just try to butt them up against one another. It's easier if you can put this one on top. So let's try to get this lined up here. You just get it best you can here. Okay, you're going to take our tape. So at this point, we have our 2 bodice pieces taped together. Now, the beauty of a PDF pattern is that you can print this pattern over and over and over again. But if you aren't too fond of the piecing process that goes into sewing with a PDF pattern, you could create this master pattern here, and then you could take your tracing paper and you could trace over whatever size it is that you would like to use, and just save this as your master pattern, and then you don't have to print it out again. But if you prefer putting it together like this and just being able to cut out whatever size you like, then that works too. So there's 2 advantages to having these PDF patterns. So this was one version of one of my patterns, but I wanted to bring another one so you could see a different type of marking, because every pattern designer is going to be a little bit different with the way that they mark their patterns. And even my book and some of my patterns are different from one another. Okay, so this is pattern from my book, So Classic Clothes for Girls. So I'm going to lay this out just like I did this other pattern, and I'm going to move this. This is a much larger pattern that we have here, okay? And again, I'm just laying these out. I am not putting them together yet. Here and here, and I just printed out part of this pattern. It's a nice big sheet here, just to give you an idea. Okay, so this pattern has a different joining marker. So as you can see, my book patterns actually have these triangular markers here. You can see them with 1A, 1B, and this is nice because it's going to just connect and pretty much make a diamond there. Okay, and it's also going to kind of help you, guide you along that this is the top row. So this is the first row. We've got 1A, 1B, and then we've got here, do we have 2? We have 2A, 2B, 2C, and that's going to help you in case your pattern pieces ever get out of order. So they will print in order, but sometimes things happen and pieces fall on the floor and you're trying to get things back in order. Those numbers are going to help you quite a bit. Okay, so let's start over here. Again, the same thing goes. You need to decide, am I going to, which one of these do I want to cut? Well, for my book patterns here, I like to cut along this line here, because you'll notice the bottom part of the pieces don't have this solid black line. So I think cutting along the solid black line is really helpful. Luckily for our first row of pieces, we aren't concerned about having to cut off any of this part of the pattern because we need that part when we join this row. But what we have to do here that we did not have to do in our other pattern is we need to join these 2 pieces together. So I am going to decide that for this pattern, I am going to cut off the right piece each time. So I'm going to cut off this one, and 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 this one. And that's what I mean when I say if you have a paper cutter, you can put those all in one pile and take those through your paper cutter. And I know we all don't have paper cutters, so we are just going to take this with our scissors, and we're going to cut this side down the black line here. I'm going to cut a few of these before I actually tape them. And I know this process is a little bit time consuming, but once you have these all together, you'll have your nice big full pattern sheet. So I'm going to take my tape here and I am going to put these together. So I want to match up my diamonds here. All right, just try to adjust it till everything looks lined up, and I think that looks pretty good. Okay, now let's go over here to this next piece. We're going to join rectangle, or I guess not rectangle, triangle 1B to 1B to make our diamond. So I got my tape. Got my tape ready. I'm gonna just slide those in, lining up this area here. Okay. You just follow these markers to get all these pieces together. All right, so now we have part of row 1 done, and you would just continue to do the same here. So for row 2, I am going to cut off the top part and this side here. I don't need to do that for the first one. I just need to cut the top part off for the first one. And then for this one, we are going to cut the side and the top. This is a great project to lay out on the floor. You want a nice big space. Also, if you have some kids that are a little bit older, I think they would find this kind of fun. It's kind of like putting together a puzzle. So you might be able to get them to help you do this too. All right, and then our last piece here. So we're just going to connect. I'm going to connect these side dots first. Most PDF patterns also include a print diagram, so you'll be able to see what the full sheet is going to look like once it's complete, so you know if you're putting it together correctly. So now we are going to join these markings here. Okay, so now you can see we've gotten moving on putting our pattern together. It does take a little bit of time, but it's really very easy. And once you have this master pattern, you can keep it together if you'd like, or you can cut it up. And if you don't like storing patterns, you could simply just throw it away when you're all finished. But they really go together very, very easily. Well, I hope today you've gotten a nice introduction into how to use a PDF pattern. You really shouldn't be scared of them. They're quite easy to use. And I don't know about you, but when I want to sew something, I want to sew it now. And that's what's so great about these PDF patterns is you get something in your mind and you want to sew it. You can purchase the pattern, download it immediately, and you are sewing maybe 30 minutes later once you've pieced your pattern together. So thanks for joining me today on Lessons with Lindsay, and I hope you'll check out some of my other videos and free projects on my blog. And until next time, happy sewing.